Imperial Yeast has been up to some interesting things lately, and they recently announced a product we are super excited about. If you're familiar with Imperial Yeast, you're likely aware of their classification system. A is for ale as an A07 flagship, L is for lager as an L17 harvest, and so on. Well, they recently released the first strain in their I series, which stands for Imperialis and refers to non-GMO hybrids or derivative yeast strains developed by Imperial Yeast that have been honed to exhibit the traits today's brewers most desire. The initial offering, I-22 Capri, is a hybrid of A38 Juice and A43 Loki, two of Imperial's most popular strains for hop-forward IPA. Whether you're into this style or just enjoy juicier fermentation characteristics, you have got to try I-22 Capri. Learn more about the Imperialis project and I-22 Capri at imperialyeast.com. Back in July of 2023, we dropped episode 292, where our focus was on the state of homebrewing. On episode 312, which came out in December of 2023, we went over our thoughts on how things went in 2023. And just a couple weeks ago, we shared my live Q&A session with patrons of Brewlosophy, which was originally recorded in October of 2023. In all of those episodes, we addressed the current lull in homebrewing and craft beer in general, to the point it started to feel almost like we were beating a dead horse. You're listening to the Brewlosophy podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and in joining me on this very unique Brews Views episode to discuss our unabashed opinions about recent developments at the American Homebrewers Association, particularly as it concerns the annual Homebrew Con, is contributor Will Lovell.
Yeah, I know podcasts, you kind of like to record them in a time capsule and, make them where they're going to be relevant 6 to 8 months from now. For those people listening to this 2 years from now, I'm sorry, this will only be relevant to this year.
Who knows, though? Who knows, though, Will? I mean, maybe it is going to be more relevant in the future.
History may repeat itself. We never know. So I apologize for that, but there is a lot of thoughts and feelings, and I am personally excited about talking about something that's a little more recent, a little more new, and a little bit more kind of raw on some levels as well. So super excited.
Yeah. So the AHA is a huge corporation. I mean, organization as far as homebrewing goes, and Brewlosophy has quite a bit of history with the AHA. As such, we could spend hours talking about the various aspects of this association, but ain't nobody got time for that. So in order to keep things as clean as possible, we are going to try to focus on our experiences with the AHA and Homebrew Con, particularly as it concerns these recent changes that have been announced, which if anyone's listening to this show, you probably know what we're talking about. We're also going to share some comments from fans of Brewlosophy about the whole ordeal, while providing some opinions on why we think what's happening is actually happening and what might be done to help. This is bound to get very interesting. Now, just a reminder that this is a Brews Views episode where we allow ourselves to let loose a little bit more than usual. We go off the rails a little bit more. We might use language that some aren't terribly comfortable with. And especially with this topic, we will likely share opinions that aren't shared by all of our listeners. Please keep in mind that the whole point of this series is to do exactly that. We see value in creating conversations about things that we might differ on, being transparent and doing it in a as respectful a way as possible. So that is our goal. All right, with that said, if you are a fan of this show and would like to receive a reward for your support, please consider becoming a patron of Brewlosophy over at patreon.com/Brewlosophy. By making a small monthly pledge, you'll receive rewards like access to unpublished contributor recipes, unique discounts at YakimaValleyHops.com, and an invitation to a monthly live Q&A session with somebody in the brewing world. For March of 2023, the sensory manager at John I. Haas and Brewlosophy's resident sensory analysis expert, Jeff Daly, will be hanging out with patrons. Jeff has been on this Q&A before, and it was really awesome, so we thought some of our newer patrons might enjoy hanging out with a professional in the world of hops and sensory analysis. To be a part of this session, you have to make your pledge of just $3 or more at patreon.com/Brewlosophy no later than Friday, March 29th, 2024, as Jeff's session is scheduled for Saturday the 30th. All past sessions are available on our private Patreon and Facebook pages, so you can go back and watch them whenever you like. Learn more about becoming a patron and check out all of the rewards we offer for your support over at patreon.com/Brewlosophy. Another really easy way to support us is by using the links found at brewlosophy.com/support when shopping online. Your shopping experience doesn't change at all, and we get a little kickback for the referral that helps us to cover the costs of running all of this stuff. Finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a rating and review of this show in Apple Podcast or wherever it is that you listen to podcasts that allows you to leave such reviews, that would be awesome as well. Feedback is brought to you by Clawhammer Supply, who are known for their incredible all-in-one electric brewing systems. I've brewed on both their 120 and 240 volt systems, and I'm telling you, these things are legit, efficient, easy to use with a relatively small footprint. You will will not be disappointed with one of these units. Plus, the guys behind the company run an amazing YouTube channel, which you can find by searching YouTube for Clawhammer Supply. If you're in the market for electric brewing gear or even just reasonably priced kettles and such, and you like to support small businesses, make sure to check out what Clawhammer Supply has to offer at clawhammersupply.com. And don't forget to let them know that Brewlosophy sent you when you're checking out. That's clawhammersupply.com. Listener Tom Tobiasen wrote in with some feedback after listening to episode 319, where we talked about using blue corn malt, which was an experiment that you did, Will. Tom says, don't think that slight giggle when mentioning chicha went unnoticed. The abject horror when my family and I were at the eclectic Dogfish Head Brewery in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, and the bartender, during our sipping mid-drink, answered our semi-joking question, I bet you were one of the chewers, right? And his response was yes. I propose an idea for a live session where you guys do a Q&A while masticating some corn for a short and shoddy chicha. What do you think, Will?
We could make it a Patreon fundraiser thing. If people want to do it, sure, I'll mash on some corn. I don't know that we want to chew on the malted blue corn though. It's really hard. I'm pretty sure we would need some severe dental work if we decided to do that.
Yeah, it might end up chewing on you, right? That's kind of the malted corn's pretty hard.
Yeah, it's super hard. So, but no, I think it would be an interesting episode. Maybe if we could drive enough funds to help fund the podcast and Brewlosophy. I mean, I'm all for it. Or maybe we pick a charity on the side. Either way.
Hey, I don't think I've ever had chicha, though it's entirely possible some homebrewer slipped me some without me knowing. The way things work at conferences and events, that's kind of how it goes. Not that I wouldn't willingly try it. I mean, I'm pretty sure the boil and fermentation would eliminate any of the ick from the mouths of those who did the masticating. Does it sound appealing to me? Not really, but who knows? Maybe it's the best thing ever, and I won't know until I actually try it. That said, I have a feeling there is a low likelihood that you're going to see me and my friends chewing up corn live while recording a Q&A session, but not because I think chicha is gross. The primary reason is that I absolutely hate hearing people talk with food in their mouth. It grosses me out so much. It's the opposite of ASMR for me. It makes me want to punch somebody in the face. Of course, that's your
reason, Marshall. Of course, that's your reason.
I'm so anal about it. My kids know. I'm constantly telling them to swallow your food before you talk. But I can guarantee you that if ever anyone from Brewlosophy does make their own chicha, you are going to hear about it. That is content gold right there. So thank you for the email, Tom. If you have show feedback, you can send it to feedback@brewlosophy.com or leave us a note on social media. When we return from this break, our views on the AHA and the recent changes to Homebrew Con. Chilling work can be a chore, especially after a long brew day, but not with the Xchillerator Counterflow Chiller, which can chill a 5-gallon or 19-liter batch of wort in 5 minutes or less, leading to a strong cold break and clear wort in the fermenter. Brewlosophy's Matt Del Fiacco uses the Xchillerator Max and absolutely loves it. In addition to improved chilling efficiency, every Xchillerator comes with a 5-year warranty that covers the entire chiller for manufacturer defects. If you're looking to up your chilling game and a CFC is right for you, head over to xchillerator.com today. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts.
Hello, saver. Whether you're saving for that trip to the tropics or saving for an emergency, now is the time to take advantage of Wells Fargo's savings options. Wells Fargo offers savings accounts that can help you save towards your goals. So, what are you saving for? Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/save to open a savings account today.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
Welcome to Codependence, the weekly podcast that gives you direct access to me, Maya Allen, and my sis, Sierra Miller. Every week, we give you insider access into our sisterhood and lives. Part self-help and part comedic relief, Codependence is all about letting your guard down. Expect a lot of laughs and maybe some tears as we navigate this crazy world together. Join us every Wednesday for this funny, tea-spilling, shade-throwing podcast.
For the first few years I was a homebrewer, I was completely unaware that the AHA even existed. And in fact, it wasn't until around 2011 or so that I realized we as homebrewers actually had an organization focused specifically on us and what we love to do as a hobby, which I thought was really cool. Now, the purpose of this episode is to share our unabashed opinions on recent changes that have been made to the AHA and particularly Homebrew Con. So for that reason, we're not going to go too deep into the history of the AHA. However, I do think it's good to let our listeners understand that our opinions are rooted in experiences as members of the AHA and all of the things that the AHA has done kind of over the years. So Will, I know that you have kind of some background info on the AHA. Let's run through some of that first, and we can kind of share our opinions on the history of the AHA before moving into where we're at today.
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight just a few things. I know we don't want to spend a ton of time, but just to go through a few things. So the AHA was founded in 1978 by Charlie Papazian, and the main goal then was to make homebrewing legal in all states and on the federal level. In 1979, he actually got it legal on the federal level. And the reason I think kind of this part's important is that they are a nonprofit that got their start in education, but also they're a lobbyist group. And however you feel about lobbying and politics and stuff like that, it's there. And then there are still legal issues today that they're addressing, which we can go into a little later. The first national homebrew competition was in 1979, I guess after it all became legal. 1982 was a year of note because that was the first GABF. So the GABF originated with the American Homebrewers Association. So that's kind of a fun little factoid to go in there. In 1988, May 7th was declared National Homebrew Day, which we do the big brew for a lot of us. That's pretty cool. I know a few years ago they did Janet's Brown Ale, and if you bought kits from like More Beer and places like that, it went to cancer research, which was a pretty awesome thing to kind of get together and rally the homebrewing community. And then kind of the more recent stuff. So in 1992, AHA became the Association of Brewers. In 2005, the Association of Brewers and Brewers Association of America, lovely alphabet soup, joined to form the Brewers Association, which is much more succinct. And under the Brewers Association bylaws, the AHA Board of Advisors has been renamed to the AHA Governing Committee. Around 2013, home brewing was made legal in all 50 states. So, mission accomplished right there. Apparently, Alabama and Mississippi were the last holdouts. And then more recently, they've kind of added some things like Home Fermentation Day, which is less specific to beer.
So there was a couple of things that history is really rad. And if anybody has ever had the opportunity to meet Charlie Papazian, he is a genuinely awesome dude. He's also a very genuine dude. I didn't know where I was going with that, but he is such a nice guy who is willing to kind of mess around with anybody. He's been on, the podcast before. It was actually at a Homebrew Con where he came over and somebody dressed him. I think it was Jersey actually went and found him and dressed him up to look like he was hiding under his hat and, some young guy, but it was really Charlie. Really great guy who I think his heart was really in it in the beginning. I'm not sure what his affiliation with the AHA and the Brewers Association is today. And on that, there are going to be things that we say that are mostly based on things that we've read online or heard from other people who know more about the history of the AHA than we do. So please, I'm going to try to couch everything that I say as not necessarily objective, but more of like, this is what I've heard, because we don't know. And if there's an issue that we address with that you disagree with or that is just patently wrong, please feel free to reach out and let us know. So the thing with, you said that the AHA is a lobbying group, and the truth of the matter is, or at least what I've heard, is that they're actually not they were never lobbyists. What they did is they supported the other folks who were actually going to their local governments, whether that was state or city or whatever it might be, and pushing for the legalization of homebrewing in these different states. So this is something I just learned in the last couple of weeks as all of these developments with the AHA has come through, is that they weren't ever technically a lobbying group, which I thought they were as well. So I think that's kind of interesting.
So that's kind of interesting to point out, because they do have a whole section on their website that's all about advocacy and state issues and things like that they're kind of supporting. So whether they support it directly or not, it's not unusual for 501c3 nonprofits to go into a little bit of lobbying, but that's interesting.
Well, and that's the thing is what I read as well was always advocacy. And I think I just presumed that because of their involvement with the whole push to legalize things, which is, that's a governmental issue, that they were lobbyists. But my understanding, I was corrected on this when I commented on it like I said a couple of weeks ago, that they were never actual lobbyists, that they advocated for the legalization. So they were, but obviously there's power in numbers, and they were a very loud voice in that advocacy. So, massive credit to the AHA for everything they did to make homebrewing what it is today. I mean, I think they deserve a lot of credit for that, at least.
Yeah. Again, the legalization in all 50 states, obviously, I don't think that would have happened without them. It's crazy to me that it was all the way up to 2013 from like 1978 that happened. But, that's pretty awesome that this organization, stuck around and was, at least advocating for that.
Yeah. So tell me, Will, I know that you're a member. Are you a current member of the AHA?
I am a current member of the AHA.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your history and why, what ultimately, the Brews Views is about sharing our opinions, not necessarily just our experiences. We have a series for that. But I want to know what your thoughts were that ultimately led to you, forking over the cash to become a member of the AHA.
So, and we can go into this. So one of the things about the AHA, if you want to enter into the national homebrew competition, you have to be a member of the AHA. And so there was a time where I was considering doing it. And so you're just like, well, let's go ahead and bite the bullet and buy the membership, because they do kind of membership drives where if you subscribe at a certain time of year or whatever, you can get a free book. I think I got free Iodophor last time from, 5-star. So they have sponsors that'll kind of hook you up with free things if you subscribe at a particular time.
So that was ultimately what inspired you to become an AHA member. I mean, I have to imagine there was at least some part of it as well that was sentimental in nature, that, hey, I want, it's not that expensive. I want to help this organization that has supported us so much. At least that was a part of my reason for joining when I did.
So I guess I've always been a little bit torn about it. Like, as someone that was, a home brewer and then a military spouse for a little while, Alabama and Mississippi were potential landing spots for us. And so I did think about, it's great there's a group out there fighting to, help make homebrew legal in all 50 states. But, with lots of large organizations, I'm a bit of a skeptic in nature as well. And so, I see good in it. And then I also see some things that maybe, as they search around, especially for the new vision, does it really align with what I think or what I believe, or is it meaningful today? So I've always kind of had that push-pull relationship.
Yeah, so have I. So I, like I mentioned before, I wasn't even aware that the AHA was a thing until 2009, 2010. And I don't have that pull to be a part of bigger things necessarily. I've never joined an association for a hobby, especially. The AHA was really the first one. And if I recall correctly, my dates might be off by a little bit here. And also we might be using terms that aren't legally correct. Apologize for that. We're just chatting here. So, but the first time I joined the AHA was, I believe, in late 2014, mid 2014, something like that. It was really soon after Brewlosophy got off the ground. And what ultimately inspired me was, first off, the stuff, what people that I respect on forums, blogs, other podcasts that I was listening to, just the stuff they were saying about it. I mean, there was a big push to get people to become members of this association. And at the time, I mean, the mid 2010s, homebrewing just exploded. So, half the people I was talking to in the homebrewing world were members of the AHA and talking about it very positively. So I have to admit that I was kind of peer pressured, willingly though, to become a member. One of the things that I really appreciated about the prospect of being a member of the AHA was that I was also joining this huge community of fellow homebrewers who at least seemingly shared similar values, at least as it pertains to the hobby of making beer at home. But the main reason I joined, admittedly, and we're going to get way into this later, was because it meant that I got to attend the National Homebrew Conference, which a few years after I joined the AHA turned into what we now call Homebrew Con. So, I was reading the social media posts of people who attended Homebrew Cons as Grand Rapids way back in 2012 or something like that. And it just, the FOMO, I'll admit, man, I want to be there. This sounds like so much fun. That was ultimately spurred on by me listening to my favorite podcast hosts like James and Steve from Basic Brewing Radio, as well as the guys from the Brewing Network, talk about the good times they were having, at HomebrewCon. So for me, that was a big push, was just joining this community of people that I really respected at the time, in this hobby. And, so 2014 is when I joined, and immediately, at the time, I forget what the costs were at the time, but I don't remember it being that expensive. My first year that I joined, I just paid for a year. the annual membership. Today that price is $43. I mean, that to me isn't that big of a deal. So $43 for the year. And then once we got into 2015 and it was time for a renewal, I renewed for the 3-year payment, which these days is only $106 for 3 years. I mean, again, in the grand scheme of things, that's not really that expensive, but do you get the value out of it is I think what people are asking these days.
Well, if you wait for one of their like really specific deals, the $43 a year could get you a book from a free book potentially. I think which one did I get? I got the Rick Steele's his IPA book last time, along with some iota for. So maybe I didn't quite the full $40 worth of a year, but you get a free book and some free iota for, and then life's not too bad. It kind of offsets the costs, and there is the Zymurgy magazine that you can get as part of your benefit. I do know that does cost a little bit extra, not a ton extra, but I think the $43 a year may be without the Zymurgy, and you got to pay like some amount over that. But lots of people do love Zymurgy magazine.
Yeah. So let's just go over some of the general, pros and cons of being a member. And we'll start with the pros. These are the benefits that the AHA really, really tries to sell to potential members who are kind of considering becoming a member of the AHA. You've got Zymurgy magazine, or Zymurgy as some people call it. Very beautifully printed magazine. I mean, I don't think anybody would argue that. We'll talk about some of our opinions on that magazine here in a bit. You've got member discounts at homebrew shops and breweries. In fact, there was a minute there where they had their own app called Brew Guru. We even promoted that app. I had it downloaded. I'm not sure. I think it might be dead in the water at this point, and I didn't really use it very much anyways. Access to a bunch of NHC medal winning recipes. So basically what they do is all of the medal winning recipes from each year at the National Homebrew Competition, they share those recipes with just members. You also get to participate in the AHA forum, which for some people is their primary source of communicating with other homebrewers online. And I think the biggest one for me is that you get to attend Homebrew Con as well as compete in the National Homebrew Competition, the annual NHC. So those are like the 6 main big benefits of being a paid member of the AHA. Is there anything else you can think of?
Yeah, I always forget to use that member discount. Like, it's one of those things that like I always forget to like look it up. And even when they had the app and it was easier to look up, but places like BJ's Brew House, which is kind of everywhere in Texas, it's almost more of a restaurant than it is a brewery, but they do brew their own beer up in Dallas or something. But you could get discounts even to there. So I always forget about that one. But yeah, Homebrew Con and NHC I think are two of the bigger reasons. Although I know a lot of people do enjoy Zymurgy and pay the extra for that. It just depends on how you like to get your content and what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think Zymurgy. I think actually these days, if I did my reading correctly, that if you pay the base price for membership, that you get a digital subscription to Zymurgy, whereas if you pay a little bit more, is how you get the print edition. I'm 100% digital nowadays in most respects, anyways. So as beautiful as that magazine is, I guarantee you it's not cheap to print and send out. So, there's some things there that I think, we're going to get into our ideas as to what's going on with the AHA here in a bit. On a bigger scale, the AHA also offers a lot of other benefits to like clubs. They have this insurance program with clubs. They promote your club. They host all of these different kind of home brewing holidays, as they're referred to, Big Brew Day, all those things that you discussed earlier. So there's a lot. From the outside looking in, there's a lot going on that started with the AHA that's cool to be a part of as a member. And especially if you are as married to this hobby as we are, it does feel good to know that you're supporting this thing in those ways, that you are, giving your hard-earned money to an organization that ostensibly is doing good with it. We will get back to that here in a minute. So let's talk a little bit more about our opinions now before we focus too much on Homebrew Con, because that's where the biggest crack, as it were, in this illusion that some of us have held about the American Homebrewers Association. That's really where it came, was in the last few weeks when we learned about some of these huge changes that are happening with Homebrew Con. So my current member, you said you're a member, Will. I joined in 2014, and when, like I said earlier, when it was up in 2015, I renewed for 3 years. This is right around the time the AHA came on as a sponsor of Brewlosophy, and I know we're going to have to address some of that stuff, so I promise. But I don't want that to be the focus of this episode. So anyways, their sponsorship did not include like free membership or anything like that. I had to pay for it still. A lot of people presumed we didn't have to, and we did. But I've never, not paid to be an AHA member. So my opinions are based on the fact that I was a real member. It wasn't just like I wasn't a talking head or somebody just supporting them. So when my 3-year membership was up in 2018, I did not renew, and I have not been a member since then. This is something that I've never talked about necessarily publicly because I don't think it's that important. And there were a few reasons. One, I personally wasn't getting very much from the Zymergy magazine. While it is very beautiful, and I think that a lot of work goes into printing this magazine with the content that they do, I started to notice that it just seemed like, a cosmopolitan magazine where every other page is an advertisement. And then the content that was in there just didn't feel all that novel. I didn't feel like I was learning very much or anything more than what I could find online. So that was not the draw for me to stay with the AHA. And then the member discounts, as we talked about earlier, just like you, Will, I was just forgetting to use them. I think I used it twice the entire time I was a member of the AHA. One time on like a bulk purchase at More Beer in Palo Alto. And the only reason I did was because they had a sign that was like, hey, don't forget to use your member discount if you're an AHA member. And then one time at a pub in Minneapolis during a Homebrew Con, because I was with a bunch of people who were using it. So like you, I just never remembered. So that wasn't necessarily the draw for me to stay with the AHA either. Now, I've always enjoyed designing my own recipes, so the access to the medal winning recipes didn't appeal to me at all. I've never been one to really care much about somebody else's recipes. I did spend a little bit of time at the AHA forum, but it just never clicked for me. If I proposed some silly experiment idea or discussed anything having to do with brewlosophy, I'd immediately get shit on by these like OG brewers or the OG members of that forum who just didn't want to hear this young dorky dude talking about the stupid experiments that are trying to disprove what we do in brewing. So that was one of the more the forums where I just felt like it was just the most against what we were up to. And so I just left. I left them alone to do their own thing. So did you ever use the AHA forums, Will?
I've lurked on them a bit. I don't usually post too much on them. Sometimes there's good information. Sometimes it's like a lot of other forums. It's hit or miss for me. So I was never a big user of the forum. I do like some of the recipes. There's one recipe that they have on there that's the Korova Milk Porter clone recipe from Gnarly Barley. And I was trying to it's a brewery in Hammond, Louisiana, and they have a really great beer that every time we kind of go by there, it's one of my friend's favorite beers. And so we try to pick some up. And I was trying to how would I brew this, where I'd go, and it gave me a really good starting spot for trying to figure out how I might brew that beer. And I made the recipe, and it actually turned out really well. Need to rebrew it someday soon. So there are some things in there that I use, but to me, again, the biggest thing is if you want to go to the National Homebrew Homebrew Con, National Homebrew Con. Let me all mix all the alphabet soup together. If you want to go to Homebrew Con, you have to be a member, and so that's kind of one of those things. Not that I've ever been, which we'll get into later, but I have wanted to have the ability to go. And then the other thing is, the homebrew competition. If I want to do that, which I've had the intention of competing the last few years. I just never have actually pulled the trigger because I am a contributor at Brewlosophy, and what time do I have to do these things?
Dude.
I've had intentions of doing that, and so it just has made sense to keep it up and going just for those things. I don't mind being a member. I don't mind having my number being counted amongst homebrewers in America, but those are kind of again at this moment the big things is the potential of a Homebrew Con or a National Homebrew competition, are the kind of the two draws of why I would need to stay in at this point.
Yeah, I would contend that's those two things, NHC, the National Homebrew Competition, and Homebrew Con, which used to be NHC, the National Homebrew Conference, are probably the two biggest draws for brewers. And here's the thing. We're kind of talking about HomebrewCon now as a benefit, and we're in the next segment, we are going to dig into all of the new stuff that's come up with HomebrewCon, I promise. But there's no denying that I had a good time at the 4 conferences I did attend. I started in 2015 when it was in San Diego and had a fantastic time. Brewlosophy was brand new, and even there, I just felt like I was treated by other homebrewers with a lot of respect, and it was fun, and people were really open about sharing ideas with us for Brewlosophy. And I would say that a lot of the inspiration for the direction direction that we headed was because of my experiences with other homebrewers at these conferences. In 2016, I believe it was in Baltimore. Then 17 was Minneapolis. And then 2018, my final Homebrew Con was in Portland. I was on vacation in 2019 and didn't attend. And then 2020, there was no Homebrew Con because of COVID, but I haven't gone since 2018. And like I said, in 2018, I let my AHA membership expire and have not and never renewed. I never paid to renew. There was some stuff that happened last year where I got like a free year of membership as kind of a gift from the AHA. We'll get into that in a minute. But I just realized for me after going 4 years that every year was basically the same thing. It was go sit in a lecture, usually from somebody who, let's just call them a homebrewing celebrity, because I've heard that term used, but a known name in homebrewing. I've seen Annie Johnson give amazing talks. I've seen Drew and Denny give talks. Michael Tonsmeyer and I believe Scott Janish did a talk on hazy IPA. We've had multiple Brewlosophy contributors give talks. That's great and all, but I did 4 years of undergrad and then 5 years of grad school to get where I'm at in my profession. I'm done sitting through lectures. Like, I don't want to do that anymore. Usually you're waking up at like 9 a.m, hungover as hell, just being honest, going to these lectures and falling asleep halfway through them anyways. That was my experience at least. And then that gets done and you're off to go walk around the expo for the third time, in 2 days or whatever. To me, that wasn't the biggest most exciting aspect anymore. And of course I loved Club Night. I loved all of the other things that they offered. Particularly though, the communing with other people, other homebrewers. I love that. Meeting people, getting to know people. As somebody with Brewlosophy, that was a different experience for me than I imagine it is for other people. I'm not going to, hide behind that. But it just didn't have that draw. And I started realizing that there are other events that I just enjoy more than Homebrew Con. For example, going up to Hop Harvest where it is more beer centric, but you find those homebrewing crowds and it becomes this whole new experience that for me was just much more enriching. Now, as far as the National Homebrew Competition goes, one of the main reasons I like I said earlier, the two reasons that I joined primarily were Homebrew Con, which at the time was NHC, and then the competition NHC, because me and my local homebrew friends were really starting to get into competing. And I competed, I think, in 2015 and 16. And then I was just done competing altogether. I hated the whole process. I'm not a very competitive person anyways. So I dropped out of the competing thing altogether. So again, that just lost its draw. There wasn't much left with all of what I just talked about. That was keeping me wanting to stay a member of the AHA. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts? I know that part of the reason that I haven't talked too much about this is because I didn't want it to come across as me trying to convince people to be like me. I think the AHA is great, but I also am skeptical of larger organizations. And I always wondered about what is going on behind the scenes. There's some behind the scenes stuff that I did get to hear, obviously being in the industry, not worth going into, but that just made it, again, less of a draw for me.
So I think there is still, I'm obviously a skeptical as well. And part of the reason I'm skeptical of things like large organizations like this is especially like, the initial get-go, they had a vision. They wanted homebrewing to be legal in all 50 states kind of thing. And so kind of when you get to that point, like what's your vision, what's your drive, what's your push? And I don't know, I guess there are some things out there, but I tried to find like a vision statement on their website and I couldn't quite find one when I went looking around. It may just be that I didn't look on the right spot or the right place. And so feel free to send that to me. I'm happy to read it. But, like what's the current vision? What's the current like drive? What's the current mission statement of it? Or is it just still all around education and expanding the hobby, which is fine. But, usually you can find that kind of info on a website.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's easy to kind of elucidate what the what the vision really is, and that's just to support homebrewing, at least on the surface, right? To support homebrewing and the people doing it, the homebrewers out there, to make sure that it remains legal in all the states, and to advocate for what it is that we think is best for the hobby. And that's how I've always viewed it. Now, we cannot talk about this or do an episode about this topic without talking about the elephant in the room, which is the fact that the AHA was our very first presenting sponsor. I'm not going to go too deep into this because I think it's kind of boring, but in 2015, about a year into the whole Brewlosophy thing, I got a phone call from the AHA, a couple guys at the AHA who I don't know how they got my number. I probably emailed it to them at some point, but when I got the call, I was like, how the hell did they know what my number was? I was actually on vacation in in San Diego, like 2 months after the San Diego conference, when I got this call, and we had a chat. And by the end of this 45-minute phone call, we had inked a deal. And it was cool. The idea at the time was just that they'd be the presenting sponsor of the website. A couple years later, we started the podcast. They wanted to get in on that action as well. So they were the presenting sponsor of the podcast. I was a novice at the time. I didn't quite understand this business as well as I did. And so it wasn't a bad deal for either party. It wasn't the best deal, I think, for either of us either, because of various differences that we held. For example, and this is all stuff that I learned from insiders after the fact, after we kind of stopped the sponsorship relationship between us. They weren't a big fan. For example, when they came out with, we'll see if people remember this, the craft beer label, the thing where there's like an upside down bottle that craft brewers could put on their packaging to indicate that it's craft and not big beer. We made a lot of fun of that. I thought it was stupid. I mean, I was very open about that on the show. And one of my things with both the Brewers Association and the AHA was I don't want to be that guy who fakes, who hides my opinions just because you want promotion. I can promote something and promote the good parts of something that even I might disagree with in other parts. I don't want to be a phony guy. And so we were very open about it. We kind of scoffed at it a little bit. On that same token, we constantly talked about our love of Miller Lite and drinking Coors Light, and we'd post photos of us on social media with, big beer cans, by big, that's capital B, big beer, macro beer cans in our hands and stuff. And it got back to me that was kind of frowned upon, understandably. The mentality at the time, and it still has kind of carried over to today, in my opinion, is that big beer is evil and it will be the death of, craft and home brewing. And we just didn't agree with that, at least as Brewlosophy as its own organization, I guess, didn't want to buy into that, and we didn't promote the same values that they were promoting. There was some other stuff, me and my friends tend to act kind of childish when we're out having fun and drinking. That's another thing that Brewlosophy is about, having fun. We didn't want to be, we actually liked the conversion of NHC to Homebrew Con because it was more party-like. To me, that's what's going to attract the younger generation. That's my opinion. And I think it did a decent job of it at first. And so we kind of leaned more into that, which I think caused some issues as well. So ultimately, in 2018, they ended their sponsorship. And there was no hard feelings. I don't have any, hold a grudge against the AHA or anything like that. But when I had that feeling of being back to just being another person as opposed to somebody who's getting paid by the AHA to promote them, it really forced me to kind of think about where I stand with that association. And I realized that they had very little to offer what I was looking for as a homebrewer at the time. So I wasn't going to go to Homebrew Con. I had other events that I was interested in. I was done competing. I didn't care about Zymergy. That information could be easily found other places online, in my opinion. And so I let my, that membership lapse as well. And so that's kind of where we're at. Last year, they reached out, got in contact with me again. We had some discussions about potential sponsorship stuff, but that just kind of fell flat. And I have a feeling the reason that didn't go anywhere, I don't really know the real reasons, but I have a feeling it was in part because of this mass exodus of members of the AHA and them realizing, whoa, we've got to pull back. We've got to start saving some money here.
Yeah, so I still think about that episode y'all did about the craft beer label every time I go to the store and see a bottle with that label on it. To me, it doesn't encourage or discourage, but I agree. Like, it's kind of one of those things where I could see either side of that argument, but I don't really care if they put that on the label or not. There are so many other breweries that don't put that on their label, and I still buy their beer. It's fine. Especially lots of neighborhood breweries that don't distribute, they obviously don't bother with it. And so I figure if I'm buying it from that neighborhood brewery, it's about as craft as it's going to get. So that doesn't really do anything for me. So I kind of chuckled when you talked about that. I remember that podcast very vividly, and I do think, at least in conversations I've seen with the Homebrewers Association, kind of folks at large, there is still kind of that mentality that, macro beer is the enemy. We have to avoid macro beer at all costs, And I do think that can be kind of an off-putting message because, as we've said in other episodes, the people that are going to come into this hobby are people that are currently beer drinkers.
Yep.
And, you automatically alienate them if all you do is make fun of the fact that they like Miller Lite or Lone Star or whatever. And so I have been that guy intentionally, as as I've said before, that will just order the random Miller Lite or the random Lone Star or the random macro lager just to like drink around with other craft beer people, so that, you know, maybe we don't seem as presumptuous because the one guy's drinking the macro lager.
Here's a perfect example. One thing I will say, when we were sponsored by the AHA, I was surprised with the lack of transparency. There was very rarely I never got like a direct email saying, hey, look, we want you to do this. We don't want you to say this if you don't mind, or can you at least like, you know, soften, you know, your talk about this. Usually what I heard was from people who were more involved with the AHA, but like not on the sponsorship level, coming to me and being like, oh man, I heard this is what they think about yada yada and the things that you guys did or whatever. So again, I can only presume, but in 2018, you know, well, actually I should mention in 2017, Chip Walton of Chop and Brew fame, we absolutely love Chip, good friend of the show. He and I had the idea to do a pre-funk party before. He lives out in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So he and I developed this whole pre-funk party that was ran at basically the same time as the inauguration or whatever, the first thing that the AHA does for Homebrew Con. And it was huge. We sold out. It was an awesome party. We had some rad people show up to that. So to repeat it, I wanted to repeat it in 2018 in Portland. Chip wasn't going to be able to make it to that one. So we just did it fully Brewlosophy. We rented out this badass karaoke bar. You know, again, it was on the Wednesday evening, which is the same time that technically Homebrew Con starts, and they want people there. Well, we pulled like 300 people from that to come and join us. And one of the things that we advertised was, everybody, you know, we are covering the first 2 Rainier beers that you drink here. So you have to, you know, imagine you've got the AHA, who is you know, under the umbrella of the Brewers Association, who is a hard push for craft, big time hate of macro, and we're sitting here as one of their, you know, main promoters saying, come to this thing and get 2, you know, Rainier beers, which is macro beer. That's not a good look for them. So I can understand, you know, why they might have been like, hey, look, we got to just part ways here. There was some other stuff as well that I've heard about, but that's one example. And to me, those are the values that I hold. Is I want to be the guy who's cool with all of that stuff. I don't give a shit if you drink Bud Light or Miller Light or Coors Light or shop at Walmart or eat meat or don't eat meat. I mean, do your own thing and let others do their own thing. And I felt, for me, with some of that stuff that was going on, that it caused me to sit back and go, why are they wasting money on a craft beer label? Like that to me was such a waste of the money that we are giving them to be members of this association that ultimately, like I said earlier, wasn't really doing much for me anyways at the time. So, you know, that's the way my brain works. That's why I ended up bouncing from the AHA. But I mean, I think it's cool. You're still a member. And how long have you been a member, Will?
Honestly, probably since about COVID. That's probably when I got more interested, and I haven't been a member for all that terribly long. My brewing story is a little different than everybody else's, because I kind of, instead of growing up brewing in community where I had homebrew clubs and stuff, I started brewing in Guantanamo Bay Naval Air Station, where there wasn't really a homebrew club. It was maybe 1 or 2 guys that just got together. So a little impromptu thing. And so the amount of effect that, you know, I could visibly see from the Homebrewers Association and some of those things, especially when I lived in Germany, again, kind of moving over there. It wasn't like I grew up in more of a microcosm, depending more on digital and less on all these external things than a lot of other people did. So it's kind of a unique situation to me.
Yeah, it's funny because it sounds like you joined the AHA right around the time thousands of people were leaving it during COVID, right?
Well, and part of that too, though, was, you know, during COVID, you're listening to old Brewlosophy episodes and you're hoping that the Homebrew Con will come back and it'll be like this reinvigorated thing. And then I just still have never gotten around to doing it. So,
well, I'll tell you, if you go back and listen to some of those old episodes and you hear our advertisements for the AHA, none of that stuff is made up. It's true. I loved Homebrew Con. I was a big fan of things at that time, and you know, over time things change. I remember a while ago, my brother, when we were in our 20s. He asked me about certain vehicles, whatever, and I told him, I was like, I would never own, you know, a big truck. I don't see the purpose. It's just a gas guzzler, blah, blah, blah. Well, cut to 15 years later, and I own a, you know, GMC Sierra 1500, and I pull a trailer with it, you know. And he's like, man, I thought you'd never own one. And I was like, so you're telling me that you can't change your mind about things? Like, I live my life open to changing my mind. That's what I love about it. So when I share these opinions, I'm not saying like these are set in stone or that I'll never go back back or revert to a different opinion. What we're sharing is our thoughts as of today based on our experiences with the AHA. And one of the things that I heard, I don't know how accurate this is, but is that the AHA has lost anywhere from like 10 to 12,000 members in the last 4 years, basically since 2019, 2020. That is just mind-blowing. And you consider, I run 2 small businesses, Brewlosophy being the main one I invest my time in these days. The way that things work is you want constant growth, even if it's small. Well, that's not happening in this industry right now. I mean, we have more or less plateaued and lost a little bit even because of the hit to this industry. That hurts. When you're an organization like the AHA or the Brewers Association, that not only hurts, that is fearful. I mean, that creates fear that you're not going to be able to sustain itself. And I think with the recent announcements about Homebrew Con, that's exactly what, at least to me, is happening. We're going to get more into our thoughts on Homebrew Con right after this break. There's no denying that stainless steel is the best material for brewing equipment, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which in addition to holding 8 gallons or 30 liters of wort, comes with a domed lid to even further reduce the chances of a messy blow-off. Plus, it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure for closed transfers. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brewing systems out there, and their prices are shockingly low. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, do yourself a favor and head over to deltabrewingsystems.com today. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste more time chilling wort. I've tried so many different options, and ultimately I settled on the super efficient immersion chillers made by Jaded Brewing. With the King Cobra and Hydra, I'm able to chill my entire batch of wort from boiling to just a few degrees above groundwater temperature in as little as 6 minutes. If an immersion chiller is right for your brewery, then do yourself a favor and check out all of the rad options Jaded Brewing has to offer at jadedbrewing.com, and be sure to let them know Brewlosophy sent you.
Fargo, the new virtual assistant from Wells Fargo, makes banking faster and easier. Like this.
Fargo, what's my checking account routing number?
And this.
Fargo, turn off my debit card.
And this.
Fargo, what did I spend on groceries last month?
And that's just the beginning. Do you, Fargo? You can in the Wells Fargo mobile app. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/getfargo.
Terms and conditions apply. Your mobile carrier's availability and message and data rates may apply. Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
There's plenty of credit unions around, but there's only one Arbuckle Federal Credit Union. Pontotoc County's local credit union, serving the personalized banking needs of Ada and beyond for over 56 years. Come see the hometown difference you'll get with me, Cheryl Lee, and my team of dedicated professionals when you bank with AFCU. At Arbuckle Federal, we truly put people before profits and your needs before ours. For local service as solid as the Arbuckle Mountains, join AFCU today. Visit us online at arbucklefcu.com.
Insured by NCUA.
As I said earlier, I have not personally attended a Homebrew Con since 2018, but various contributors of Brewlosophy have been present at each one since. Obviously, there wasn't one in 2020, but this includes, 2020, I don't know wherever 2021 was, the 2022 conference in Pittsburgh, and then the 2023 conference last year in San Diego, California, both of which I learned yielded wildly low turnout. And, a lot of people online, most recently, in fact, with the announcement of the changes to Homebrew Con, have been talking about who were there, right? We're talking about just how paltry the turnout was and how empty things felt. Now, it was at the San Diego Homebrew Con last year in 2023 that the AHA announced that they were going to be combining the 2023 conference with GABF. Now, a little offshoot, just a reminder, GABF got started by the American Homebrewers Association. It originally, my understanding is that GABF was a small part of this homebrew conference that was started back in the 90s or whenever it got started. So I think that's really interesting. Now, while they apparently didn't provide a solid reason for why they were doing this, they did push it as being a good thing, that, by combining these two things, not only are the homebrewers get to have access to GABF, but that people attending GABF are going to get to see what homebrewing is all about. Well, a couple weeks ago, it was announced that Homebrew Con now is completely canceled for 2024 and that it's going to be replaced by I gotta laugh at this, by the AHA is referring to it as Homebrew HQ. HQ is in headquarters, which ultimately amounts to a booth that is accessible by only AHA members who decide to pay for attending the GABF. What the hell?
So it's not all that surprising they're looking at a different direction or something different, because let's just face it, large-scale gatherings as a whole are struggling post-COVID. Even the GABF numbers have been lower than normal over the last year or two, right? Beer in general is down, and this has a trickle effect, and we did a whole podcast basically on why homebrewing's down. And then we know... I think the AHA membership, from what I've seen in the numbers looking around, it was 46,000 in 2017. And I think Julia Hers was quoted recently on the John Hall's Drink Beer, Think Beer podcast as saying it's just over 30,000 for AHA membership right now. So
it's crazy. Man, that's a huge drop, man. Jeez.
Yeah. So obviously things are down. Things are tight. And so the announcement of we're going to combine them next year to Homebrew HQ, I guess you kind of get it, because again, it's a hard thing to put on, a lot of things going on, but to say that it's not a little bit disappointing. I was one of the skeptics. Let's wait and see. I do know there were people last year that just completely dismissed it as soon as it was announced as being the death nail. I wasn't quite that extreme, but now I'm starting to kind of lean more towards that. What the heck is going on here, guys? Because I know there's been some promises of 2025, but they're still real scant with details and anything specific. And it may be because they're depending on figuring out numbers for how many homebrewers go to GABF this year.
Yeah. Man, do I have some thoughts on this. Again, most of it's speculation. I have not been involved with the AHA in pretty much any way since 2018. So I hopefully people trust that this is coming from a position of just a home brewer who happens to also be in the industry. When they announced last year, I heard it through Brewlosophy contributor Mike Neville, who was at the 2023 conference in San Diego. I think Andy might have gone too, Andy Carter. They texted me and were like, holy shit, dude, you're not going to believe this. They're combining Homebrew Con and GABF. Here's the part of that bothers me. I am obsessively transparent. I want people to be to know. I don't like hiding shit. I mean, I'll be honest. I'm going to slip up. I talk too much. I say too much. So for me, it's just easier to be transparent and let people know what's really going on. Hopefully, we've sent that message to our fans and our listeners. I feel like the AHA's whole spin as this is going to be a good thing was just such utter bullshit. And it felt to me like what they were doing was trying to hide something, like hide the fact that we are not doing as well as we hoped, and we can't afford to keep doing things the way that we are. I feel like if they would have just come out and admitted that, people would have trusted them more, and people would have had a little bit softer of a response to the way things are going. Combining the GABF with Homebrew Con, it was obvious that it was some attempt to try to do one event so that it costs less money overall. There are a lot of comments that people have left about as to what's actually going on between the BA and the AHA. We'll talk about that in a minute. Again, they're just comments from people who claim to know things that we don't. But to me, it was just, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, the first time I went to Homebrew Con in San Diego, I felt like it was this huge, beautifully put on event. Everything was well organized. I mean, there was so many people there, thousands of people there. And I think last year they said that maybe 1,200 people, I could be off on that, but like 1,200 people showed up overall. That's a lot of people, don't get me wrong, but it's nowhere near the numbers that were coming in the mid 2010s. And you have to wonder, like, we know that people are moving out of homebrewing. We've talked incessantly about why we think that might be. But dude, you don't make the changes necessary to account for that. And this is what ends up happening, right?
Yeah, and not to be too cynical, which I am kind of, again, skeptical and cynical by nature, but this almost seems like, this sounds really jaded, like a pitch for the Brewers Association to get their GABF numbers up.
Yes,
at the expense of Homebrew Con. You know, and
Without
that's
a doubt.
literally and that maybe that's true or not true, but that is the optics that they're presenting without giving us more information. And then also, no homebrew at the Homebrew HQ.
What the
you
fuck?
Cannot,
come on. Dude, that's
you
just
cannot
crazy.
bring your own homebrew to the Homebrew HQ, and they'll have celebrity homebrewers serving their own, but there's no beer shares, you know, and they have some like celebrity speakers or something, but there's no education sessions. And I can't even imagine. And then again, I referenced John Hall's podcast earlier that she talked about there were going to be demos, and that because demos are the best way to bring in these GABF kind of craft beer enthusiasts. But all the demos are, from what I've seen or what I've read, are happening at the Homebrew HQ, which you have to be an AH member to get into. So
Exactly.
none of this makes any sense to me. I'm like, I get it. And I know, like, nothing against the people. I know they're just trying to put a face on it and be optimistic. And I'm sure, again, some ways of what happens this year may correlate to what's going to happen in 2025. That's why I think they've been a little tight-lipped on it, because they don't really know what the optics and numbers are going to be after this. But seriously, it's not good optics, people. It's very bad optics. No homebrew at the Homebrew HQ unless somebody else brewed it.
It's such a joke, dude. I mean, we're being really frank here. That's what the purpose of this series is. I don't mean to diss the AHA. To be honest with you, I don't think necessarily that it's the AHA making these decisions. I do think that there's a cumulative effect of poor decision making on the AHA's part that have ultimately led to where they're at today. But there's a lot of talk about the BA and the Brewers Association and them not really giving much of a care about the homebrewing side of things anymore, yada yada. But yeah, dude, the optics, come on. I mean, my hunch is that 2025 is not happening. Just based on the reaction to the news of this stupid Homebrew HQ thing that we're hearing about. I do want to give a shout out to John Hall. His podcast is called Drink Beer, Think Beer, which I was receiving emails a couple years ago when I think it's been, I don't know how long he's been doing that show, asking if they're affiliated with Brewlosophy because of our tagline, you know, they who drink beer will think beer. That's just a quote that I believe it's like Washington Irving said or something, that I picked up on. I saw somebody post somewhere else. So we're just using the same quote. His podcast is great. He is an excellent interviewer, and I highly recommend going and listening to his latest podcast where he interviews Julia Hertz. I personally think it's very telling. I think there was an element of defensiveness that was palpable in that episode. I think John asked a lot of very pertinent questions that got skirted around. By the way, John, my mortgage is about the same as yours. But anyway, you could tell that it was, at least to me, it seemed like, maybe they weren't expected by the guest on that show. Like you said, there's a lot to be learned from that, and we'll let listeners kind of interpret that interview for themselves. But I thought it was very telling.
There's one question I had from the interview, and again, John Hall's great. If you email John Hall, he will respond to your emails. He's just a great guy. If you're into Rauch beer, he is the guy, and he's really just a great interviewer and a great writer. And so I really appreciate everything John Hall does. What I would say though, there's one thing out of that interview that like really seemed interesting to me is that, one of the things that got blamed as the draw of homebrewing is that, people stopped homebrewing because craft beer opened back up after COVID. And so I thought kind of blaming craft beer as the problem was very interesting, since even craft beer sales are down tremendously. Yeah. That was just one of the things of that interview that really stuck out to me as being really odd.
What we can say, I agree with you. I think that was there was a lot in that it sounded like they were just kind of grasping for straws, not they, it was Julia who was interviewed, but I have to imagine that she's the voice of the AHA. It's not just her opinions. But this whole thing where it's like trying to find the reason, why aren't we attracting, new homebrewers now? Where's this young generation of people who want to drink alcohol and all of that? The one truth that we can speak to is that something about what we enjoy is not appealing to younger people, period. Now, we can pretend to know why that is. I personally think that a big part of it is that the younger people I've talked to a lot of them. They view this hobby as like an old white dude club. And who wants to be affiliated with that? I mean, when 98% of the people who do this thing look just like you and me, Will, that's not a terribly attractive prospect for somebody who doesn't, to want to come in and join this. Now, we can say all day long that we would love to make this more appealing to people who don't look like us. And again, we've belabored this point, but we just have to accept that the up and coming people who are going to be drinking don't find this thing very appealing. We have to accept that hard truth before we can actually start doing things to make it more appealing. And I don't think that making, cereal milk beers is the answer. Maybe it is, but I do think that being open to that being enjoyable to other people is part of the answer. That opening up our perspectives on macro beer and realizing that they are the shoulders on which craft stands. That we have to honor that. And nobody wants to sit around and listen to old, chubby, hairy guys talk about their hate of Budweiser. I mean, it's stupid.
First of all, I've lost about 10, 12 pounds lately, Marshall. So,
hey, congrats, dude.
And if I need to put some black dye in this old beard of mine, I can try to look a little younger, but the hair, it is receding, sir. And there's nothing to be done to make that look younger. Wear a ball cap, I guess. So just saying, no, not that I don't, agree with you. You and I have talked about this on this podcast in ad nauseum. And I do think that we do have to kind of take a step back, and just realize too that younger people, like you said, just aren't as into beer as what we used to be back in my generation, your generation, and people older. Granted, at our homebrew club, we do have some younger guys that are in their 20s and 30s, but again, most of us are kind of middle-aged folks. I live in San Antonio, so we have a lovely Hispanic population that also is well represented in our club, and I'm very proud of that.
Love it.
And so, but I do know that our demographics are different than the rest of the country. So I really love that. But what do you do? I think inclusivity is part of it, but part of that inclusivity is just letting the guard down. I don't think hating craft or hating macro is going to be the answer to get more people homebrewing. I think it's just got to be, let's give it all a great big hug, and in a rising tide, all ships rise up. And I think we just got to figure out what can we do to make beer more interesting to younger people again, and that's kind of it. Although some of them are choosing not to drink, I think that's fantastic. Again, that's for health reasons. That's a great thing. And I went to a really nice restaurant, and they had mocktail pairings with their menu, which I thought was amazing.
Heck yeah, that sounds fun. Mocktail. So they're like super sweet and you get no benefit in the end. I mean, I like booze, everybody knows that.
If you went to this place, their mixologist there, she's very, very talented. It actually, because of her talent in making regular drinks, it made me want to go back just to do try some of their mocktails and some of their mocktail pairings, because she's just a very talented mixologist. That's
rad, dude. Yeah, that's something that I would love to do with my kids, in fact, because my kids are very well acquainted with what mom and dad like to drink on the weekends type of deal. So as far as this Homebrew HQ goes, I'm gonna throw out some presumptions here, and the first one is that I don't think there's going to be a very big turnout at all. Judging by the response that I've seen online, there's not going to be, it's just not going to be a successful event. And I think that is ultimately going to inform what happens in 2025, which is, in my opinion, nothing. I think this is going to be something that we're going to see for a few years. And I think the AHA has to take a big step back, take a big breath, stop getting pissed off at people like us who actually speak our minds about this thing that we have given money to. We are the members, or I was a member, but you, Will, are the member. You deserve to have your voice heard and to be able to speak honestly about this thing. I just don't think that they've been very transparent with us. I don't think, and I do believe that members realize that. I think we sense that. And perfect example is the fact that nobody saw this coming before San Diego. No one would have expected, the blending of Homebrew Con with GABF, and then 6 months later, we're just going to can it all together. You can come to our homebrewers booth at GABF and watch us brew a beer, but only with other homebrewers, even though we're saying that we want to attract GABF attendee. It doesn't make any sense. To me, it's very silly. Now, my understanding is that I don't want to speak ill of anybody that I don't know, but some fairly well-known names have called out the current president and CEO of the Brewers Association. His name is Bob Peace, under whose umbrella, again, you have to remember, the AHA resides under the Brewers Association umbrella, as intentionally making moves to eventually dissolve the AHA altogether. Now, I don't understand how that could be of benefit other than the whole fewer moving parts means fewer broken pieces idea. My understanding is the AHA was bringing in a decent chunk of change for the BA. So, I don't get it, but my opinion is that you have to be willing to significantly pivot or even press the reset button if you want things to continue to be successful. And just where we're at in this day and age, keeping things the way they are, the AHA grew way too fast for its britches. They grew out of it. And I think that there was some illusion that we're just going to keep it going the way it is. We'll keep getting these huge conference centers. We'll keep, all of these vendors who come to the Homebrew Con and give us the big amounts of money to display their wares. They'll keep doing that because they love the AHA. Well, the proof is in the pudding. We were a vendor 1 year, and it was a badass year. It was 2018. We did a combined booth, quote unquote booth, with Yakima Valley Hops, Imperial Yeast, and Mecca Great Estate Malt. And my understanding is it was the biggest booth that year, and may have been one of the biggest ones ever, in Homebrew Con history. It cost a lot of money. I was in the red. Brewlosophy was massively in the red after that conference, but we did it out of support. People don't have that kind of ability, financially speaking, to do that these days. And you got to make changes. And I just feel like they are the victim of their own beliefs that this thing is more appealing than it actually is in real life.
Yeah, it's kind of like, there are some various levels of like the life cycle of like companies and organizations, but, and so I'm not going to get into the very specific ones, but, you kind of start off with like a vision, and then you have kind of growth, and then you have like maturity and structure. And then once that kind of vision starts to die off, you have to kind of do a post-mortem, if you will, and then reinvent your company and then revise what your vision is, your rebirth and regrowth, and kind of, and that's how companies like IBM have been so successful, is they've reinvented themselves over and over and over again. And so at some point, I think there needs to be a reinvention here. Like, you hit that spot on. There's kind of something that's going on. There has to be a reinvention of focus, reinvention of whatever. And I don't know. I hear the same rumors about the BA and the AHA, and I hear all that stuff, and maybe their organizational goals don't align anymore as much as they used to. I don't know. Like, I'm not in those meetings. I have no insider information like that. So maybe it would be good for a parting of ways, just so the AHA has more freedom to do what they think they need to do. I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what. I think that if that's the case, and here's the thing, it's going to be spurred on by homebrewers, not by the people who are currently in the AHA, because effectively they are employees of the Brewers Association. So if that's going to happen, if there's going to be an independent association for homebrewers by homebrewers, it's not going to be something that's spun off of the current AHA. That's got to die. It's very, very sad death, and something new has to come and replace it. And that is independent from the start from the Brewers Association. And you know what? Maybe that's a good thing for the BA as well. Who knows, right? But I do think it has to, at this point, I mean, I don't know if there's any coming back from where they're at. Now, maybe I sound cynical here. This is just based on my own, observations and things that I've heard, again, that we're not necessarily getting too much into on this episode. But I just don't know how you come back from this, particularly given the response. So speaking of these responses, we did, when the AHA announced the cancellation of Homebrew Con in 2024 and the this new thing that they're doing, we posted about it, just like a lot of other names in homebrewing posted about it on the Brewlosophy Facebook page. And the post, basically, I'll just read what the post says. Homebrew Con has officially been called off for 2024, and a bunch of changes have been made to the thing that is happening in its place at GABF. No grab bag, no club night, and most surprisingly, no homebrew will be allowed. What are your thoughts? Will you be attending? And is this a sign of things to come? This post yielded, I think, something like 70 comments or so. And so what I thought we would do, we don't have time to read every single one of these comments, so I pulled some of the top ones. In Facebook you can sort by relevance, and so I just pulled some of the top ones off of that. I thought we'd read them, and it's my presumption that if you're posting on a public Facebook page, you're perfectly comfortable with us going public with it on the podcast as well. So I do apologize if you didn't want your name out there, but I'm going to do it anyways. Let's just comment on some of the comments that people left on the post. How's that sound, Will?
I think that sounds good to me.
Okay, so the first one comes from Annie Johnson, whom a lot of you, I'm sure, know. She's a fantastic brewer, particularly of Czech lager, and was, I forget what the actual title is, but she got to go brew at Pilsner Urquell with, the brewmaster there and all of that stuff. Person has been involved with the AHA for a very long time and on many different levels. Annie says, it's not called Homebrew Con, if you noticed, but Homebrew HQ. I don't know how you could have a Homebrew HQ at a pro beer festival, but what do I know? It felt like a good day to leave the governing committee, so I did. No one was listening to me anyway. I maintain that any entity or person that attempts to kill my spirit for homebrewing as a hobby that helped me get through a few of the most difficult times in my life, gets kicked to the curb.
This one hurts for me. Just because Annie is such I don't know her personally, but she's such a great brewer. And then, the AHA, is in their drive to get like more diversity and things throughout there. I can't think of a more diverse voice of homebrewing out there than Annie Johnson, who's also not just a woman, but she's a good damn brewer. So, you know what I mean? Like, she's a great effing brewer. Who just happens to be a woman of color, and that's fantastic. So I can't imagine how her kind of peeling off from the fold does any benefit to what they're currently trying to do. She's such a strong voice in the brewing community in various places. She also did throw a shout out to I think it was Sandy Cockerham and Gail Milburn for what they've done to keep NHC alive. So so hopefully there's no writing on the wall for that as well.
Yeah, she did. And I think it was on the same post, or may have been somebody else's where she shouted them out. But I agree. And I feel bad for, Sandy and Gail. You think about it. They're not the ones making the decisions. As far as I know, they're not the ones making the decisions for the cost to enter a competition. It is untenable at this point. It costs way too much to compete in the NHC. And for what? Oh, you might win in Kasi. Does that even matter these days? I mean, people just don't seem to care. When you have to pay $1,000 to ship all of your beers that you want to compete with twice to two different locations, and when you do that, you are no longer in control of how that beer is treated. You can only cross your fingers and hope. Man, it's like, yes, the NHC is rad, but it's almost like they're making it this thing that nobody wants to compete in anymore. So, but I agree with you about Annie's comment. This just hit that spot in my heart, man, because she is so dedicated to this hobby and has committed so much of her energy into being involved, whether it's with people on social media or with the AHA on the governing committee. She's constantly getting around. She says yes every time we've asked her to do something for Brewlosophy. She has always agreed, and she's been wonderful at that. And for her to feel so burned like this, I just think that this is such a good analog to how people in general are feeling about some of the stuff that's going on at the AHA. So Annie, we love you. And hopefully something happens to where you don't have to kick, the whole thing of homebrewing to the curb. I don't think that's ever a possibility with somebody whose spirit is so strong for this. So, but yeah, crazy stuff there. So next comment came from Will Allwart, which if you've been watching the Brewlosophy show, apparently he lives near Martin out there in North Carolina, because he's been on the Brewlosophy show a couple of times. Now he's also a very active member of the Brew Club. He says, I will not be attending and probably won't be renewing my membership. Maybe it's time to finally launch the grassroots version of HBC. BrewCon. Now he did the BR umlaut UCon, obviously indicating a Brewlosophy conference of some sort. Here's the thing, Will. This is something we've been talking about, not because we're necessarily excited to try to develop something like this, but because we, for years, have been getting emails and comments from other homebrewers saying, we want something different. We don't want to sit in a lecture. We want to walk around and talk to people and be more involved in these things. I'm not saying that that's going to happen. Obviously, with the state of homebrewing as it is today, I don't think we can make that happen immediately. But Brewlosophy's doing all right still, and that might be something we talk about in the future. I don't know.
Just so you know, I call Will Allworth the Dapper Will. I'm Bearded Will. He's Dapper Will. So that's what I roll with on that particular relationship. But Will is great people. I know he obviously is echoing a lot of sentiments of people. But, Will, if you want me to go get you that Burger King crown, I'm willing to crown you the king of BrewCon there, buddy.
Yeah, he can start it, right? We'll just let him roll with it. Isn't there Whiskey Will as well? So you got Whiskey Will, Dapper Will, and what did you call Bearded Will?
Yep. I'm the beard. The other one's the whiskey, and then Will Albert is the dapper one.
I love it. That's hilarious. I'm not joking about this. If people are interested in, it would be much smaller and it would be very differently designed in doing something, more that is, when I say it's more brewlosophy, quote unquote, in nature, I'm just talking about, active experiments. When you come, you get to participate in the various things that we do for data collection, and then having more of an involved feel. This is exactly what we were talking about with our friends from Yakima Valley Hops prior to COVID. Was creating some sort of a conference like this. We wouldn't even call it a conference. We'd probably call it a party because that's how we roll. It would be meet up, I guess. But we would, it would be very educational and it would be much more limited in terms of how many people could show up because it wouldn't be something that we would do to get rich, to make a lot of money. So if you're interested in that, let us know. That's the kind of stuff that we roll with. And I'm just crazy enough that I might actually start working with other people to create something for homebrewers to kind of collectively go to and do this kind of stuff. So Scott Mendez left a comment. He said, awful. The best parts of Homebrew Con, they got rid of. I don't know why anyone would attend. Hear, Scott.
So I guess he's talking about either the grab bag or the party in or something. I'm not sure what he considers to be the best part, or just the ability to share your own homebrew with others.
All of that.
It kind of feels like a GABF booth at for the homebrewers there, instead of like an actual con of anything, because that's what it is. So I share your sentiments. I think you share the sentiments of lots of people, Scott.
The more I think about it, the more the term Homebrew HQ makes sense. I mean, they're at this ostensibly large event, GABF, with a little booth just for homebrewers. I mean, that's kind of how I think the homebrewers or members of the AHA are feeling now, is that we've just been kind of shoved in this corner and we don't matter, even though the GABF got its start with us, arguably. It's an odd thing to look at. And I totally understand Scott's sentiment, man, that the best parts of Homebrew Con, sharing homebrew, in my opinion, going to club night, they're gone. That's just not a thing. Why the hell would anybody spend money to go to GABF for the purposes of getting to sit in a booth at the Homebrew HQ? It doesn't make any sense to me.
As an aside, GABF is a good conference in its own right to go to if you're a craft beer enthusiast, but if you're going for homebrew, obviously it's not the place.
Yeah, my understanding is that the GABF is hurting pretty bad too, that they're not yielding nearly as many attendees as they were in the past. So we'll see where that ends up anyways. Next comment came from Michelle Ryder Wonder, who says, this is all kinds of lame. I feel like the AHA money goes to the BA, that's the Brewers Association, and we all get left high and dry. Why the hell is the Homebrew HQ exclusive to AHA members? Shouldn't we be showcasing the hobby and trying to attract new folks?
So that is kind of what we discussed a little bit earlier, is that, they talked about doing, demos as a way of like bringing people into the hobby. But if you're only doing the demos in the Homebrew HQ that is AHA exclusive, how are you supposed to bring people into the fold of this hobby and grow it when you've made this like kind of exclusivity place? So that's kind of, maybe it's worth rethinking about being more inclusive, letting anyone come in, but maybe they just don't have the resources to pull that off. I have no idea.
We can't speak for the AHA or the Brewers Association on this, but I again, Michelle, I get your sentiment. It feels like we are being left high and dry, that there's very little concern. Now, Denny Kahn from Experimental Brewing, he did leave a comment on Michelle's comment, or a response, I should say, where he says, that has always been true. The BA, Bob P, I don't know if it's Peace or Peasy, views the AHA as nothing more than a revenue source for the Brewers Association. Yeesh.
That is tough. And Denny would know more, because I think Denny was kind of inside of that organization a little bit deeper than the rest of us, and he stepped down, I forget how long ago. So he probably would know more about that than we would, but that's tough. That's a tough pill to swallow.
I mean, one thing I appreciate is the fact that you've got, people aren't necessarily hiding behind their opinions anymore. I mean, they're sharing their opinions and not hiding behind being PC about it. Yeah, I mean, if Denny, who was a member of the governing committee for quite some time, has a lot of connections with the AHA and was a huge supporter of them, if he's willing to say this publicly, I mean, shit. I mean, we have no reason not to at least consider this as being true. So it's just a really sad state of things. Olin Sudduth, some of you might recall Homebrew Dad or Brew United. Olin Sudduth was behind both of those. He commented, I called this when they first announced merging Homebrew Con with GABF. I wish I wasn't right. The AHA is dead. Whew.
Ooh, that's pretty strong. I agree that Homebrew Con, at least for the foreseeable future, is probably dead. I guess he was one of the dismissers instead of the skeptics, and it turns out he wasn't that wrong. So we'll see how his Nostradamus-esque abilities go for the AHA's dead quote.
Well, I'll tell you, in my professional field, there's a common saying that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And I'm just saying that if things continue to go the way that they have for the last few years, if similar decisions get made, I mean, I think Olin may be onto something. For me personally, the AHA is dead. I have no reason to even, give them any of my energy at this point other than this episode. Obviously, I just don't see this as being a good thing in any way, shape, or form for homebrewers or for the AHA. So it's a very odd state of things. The next comment comes from Craig Schubert. He said, I'm not surprised Homebrew Con was called off. The 2023 conference in San Diego this past year was a big disappointment. Homebrew Con in 2015, San Diego, that was my first one, was great. And the Homebrew Con in 2018, Portland, which happened to be my last one, wasn't too shabby. The participating breweries and vendors have been tapering off over the years, at least at the events that I've attended. It's too bad. I really enjoyed the 2015 conference. Now, there's something Craig hits on here that I kind of want to touch on as well. And that's the fact that the vendors who come to Homebrew Con, both in terms of businesses that sell wares as well as folks like us, who just want to be there for homebrewers, have stopped wanting to spend the money to exhibit at the Homebrew Con. And a part of that is because they're not bringing in the revenue they were either. So this is what I mean by you have to be able to pivot based on the understanding of where the industry is at. And I'm just not sure, based on the decisions that are being made, that was of high consideration, when it came to Homebrew Con 2021 through 2023. I think there was some expectation that, all of these vendors are of course they're going to keep coming to us and doing this. When you've got half the number of people attending, that's half the number of eyes that you are essentially promoting your stuff to. Why? How is that beneficial? How, cost benefit here? It's pretty simple if you ask me.
Yeah, so that's kind of the problem here, right? Is that even we've experienced it with our supporters and things and our sponsors. Things are tapering off. Things are getting smaller. Unfortunately, again, with this decline, there's a change in landscape. So maybe we were hopeful that the 2020 COVID numbers of everybody getting back in the hobby would spur on future growth and success. Unfortunately, that just wasn't the case. So it's kind of I'm with you. It's kind of an adjust fire. Maybe you had to just scale it way back to be something much more tenable, much more manageable, but it's kind of hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. I can't help but view it as being in an utter tailspin at this point, and I'm just not sure we're able to correct from that, at least in its current form. So Blake Marias, I guess, said, this is one of those situations where I'm really sad with the outcome, but to say I didn't see it coming, I would be lying. The whole hobby is hurting. There are numerous reasons why, and there's no easy solution to turn it around, unfortunately. When I started homebrewing 16 years ago, I was one of the young guys in the club, and now at 40, I'm still one of the young guys at the club. Looking back, I'm glad I made GABF 10 years ago, and now I'm upset that I never get to make it to a Homebrew Con. Man, Blake, that is exactly my experience as well. When I started going to my club, 15, 16 years ago, I was one of the younger guys. I'm still among some of the, we're just not attracting the younger generation, which I don't know why,
Yeah, I'm thankful that I'm not the young guy at our club. I mean, I'm not that old. I'm like 41. So, but I am very much middle-aged, very firmly there. And so I am glad I'm not the young guy in the club. We do have people younger than me, but it does seem that even when we attract new people, they're still right around my age demographic. So, I don't know what the easy solution turnaround is either. If there was an easy button, I'm pretty sure we'd have all hit it by now. But hopefully, things will turn around. Usually with every lull, there is a resurgence. So hopefully we're getting close to the bottom so we can start going back up.
Amen to that. Joe DeOria says, seems to me the AHA will be gone in another year or two without a miracle rebirth. My understanding is a few Brewers Association board members from the pro side are really pushing to drop the AHA. I've always felt the AHA membership was worth it for Zymergy and what they did for homebrewing lobbying wise. But at this point, I will not renew my membership as they have basically given up on homebrewers. Only reason they are probably having NHC this year, and I think he's referring to the competition, is because entry fees are a big chunk of their revenue. That is so sad to me. Right now, I am on the fence if I will ever enter NHC this year. I'll tell you, Joe, I'm not a big competitor anyways. I would never spend the money. I spent almost $300 the last time I entered NHC, and prices have gone up since then. There's just no way.
Yeah, that's kind of what made me hesitate last year. Again, I don't have a ton of free time anyways to brew beer, but like the NHC last year, I looked at the entry competitions plus shipping plus everything else, and you're like, is it really worth it to have somebody else drink my beer? And I still see the appeal because NHC is still it's 4,000 competitors or so. The next biggest competition behind that is probably Bluebonnet up in Dallas Fort Worth area, and so. I could be wrong on that. If I'm wrong, please feel free to shoot me an email, whatever. But don't shoot me an email. Yeah. So I get where if you want to think that you're going up against everybody in the best, how that might be appealing. But yeah, the whole shipping twice. I know it's been spun as like something we wanted. I'm not sure that's something that I would want just because it's such a pain to ship beer, such a pain to get things there. And again, I do think you have a few people there that are clinging to it, organizing it, and making it happen. But it's going to be a tough go forward, and this may be, I'm not trying to put writing on the wall, I'm not trying to say anything down, but I might compete in it this year if you've been on the fence about it, because it may not exist next year if this is something that you really want to do.
Yeah, my heart goes out to the people who are impassioned by the competition and have put so much of their time and energy into making sure that it remains the biggest, homebrewers competition. With the way things are, and again, the talk that we're seeing online about, perspectives with people dropping out of the AHA, you can't compete in the NHC if you're not an AHA member, right? I mean, am I correct in that, Will?
Yeah, you have to be an American Homebrewers Association member. So if people are dropping out of the AHA, but again, out of 30,000 people are, 3,000 are competing. So it's not, 4,000 people are competing in this event. So I don't know, if that's the big draw. But yeah, if the AHA goes away, the NHC, as we know, it's kind of a nebulous thing at that point.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if we hear that this is one of the lowest entry years, for the NHC. I sure hope that, they're able to keep it going for the sake of the people who really appreciate that, even if I'm not one of them. But man, yeah, crazy times. So final comment we're going to read comes from Mark Rose. He says, I was planning to go, but not now. Too bad, AHA. Don't lose your membership base in the effort to save money. I would rather have seen a cut down ad hoc make the clubs put it on, something combined with GABF than an outright cancellation. Now, my understanding is that the original AHA, or what they called the NHC back in the day, the original Homebrewers Conference, was something that the AHA would kind of put in the hands of local clubs to help organize, and they would take care of all of that stuff, with the AHA's support and backing, and then that would be the NHC. There, I was reading a comment from, I wish I could remember who put it. It was somebody known in the homebrewing world, though. But they were essentially commenting on how, when NHC converted to Homebrew Con, it went from this, more quiet, very, very focused homebrew thing that wasn't very party-like, to this dark, loud, party atmosphere. I have to say that I do think that the move from NHC to Homebrew Con was probably an attempt to keep it appealing to the younger generation, which is arguably very important. Did it work? I'm not sure. Do I think that reverting back to a more tame version of the NHC would help? I don't personally think it's going to. I think what it might do is attract some of the old folks, and I say old being one of them, who wanted it to be that way in the first place and didn't like the move to Homebrew Con. But I don't think you're going to attract very many young people. So it's going to ultimately fizzle out anyways, right? I mean, this is just speculation on my point.
I I kind of like the idea of maybe having like more regional clubs put things on, just because, again, some of those like, regional connections you make, like from San Antonio, Austin, Houston, Dallas, for me anyways, they're kind of like more regional, more local, more people that I'll interact with more recently. And then again, a good way to like kind of get more local, I guess, connections to kind of network with those folks. And so I think doing something like that would be beneficial. As far as like a national one, me flying to Pittsburgh or wherever to go meet some of those guys, it's cool and it's fun, but I think maybe if you did more regional stuff where you kind of had to put up to the clubs that were regional, and then you had, and however you wanted to divide up regions, that kind of thing might work. But again, I think the glory days of reminiscent, the nostalgia people are going to have, I don't know how you make it live up to that.
Yeah. Yep. I'm in the same boat, man. And it's just to the point now with this huge change, which I at least I view it as being very, very big deal. I just don't see how you're going to keep members, passionate about wanting to be a part of this association where they feel like they're not getting the support that we deserve, that are the funds, the membership fees aren't going to pay for the things that we feel like they should be going towards. It's a really sad state. And, at this point, the best we can do is hope that something good comes from it. But cynic that I am, I just don't see it happening. So that was just a slice of some of the comments that people left on our Facebook post about this change. If you follow other known homebrewing figures, you're likely going to see even more comments. I think they're fascinating to read. Nearly all of them sound basically the same. People are disappointed. They're skeptical of the reasons provided by the AHA for making these changes, and many are making the decision to leave it all together. As someone who left years ago, I can't say this surprises me. I've had some absolutely incredible experiences with the AHA. I have no hard feelings personally towards them, both as a member and as someone who they have sponsored. But I've also had, some experiences that leave me questioning and scratching my head and wondering why these decisions are being made. I do feel like there is an utter lack of transparency, and I have a feeling that there are some people probably listening to this episode wanting to reach out and strangle me because, he's saying these things or whatever. That's fine. I feel like being honest is the only way that we're going to get to the real truth of the matter when it comes to this stuff. And if we keep just kind of hiding behind things and pretending that, every decision we make is for the betterment of homebrewing, we know it's bullshit and we see right through it. So my suggestion, if you're listening AHA, if you're listening Brewers Association, come out and tell us the truth. We just want to know the truth. What's really going on? Be open about it. I think you're going to earn a lot more by, in terms of earning the respect back of members of other homebrewers who have left or who have considered joining but aren't going to now. You're going to learn a lot more of our respect if you just let us know the damn truth. So, Will, that is all I've got. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, just to echo it, because we've said it 100 times, like we don't have anything, personally negative against the AHA. We're not trying to attack them. We actually, for the sake of this hobby, for the sake of everyone, we hope that we all succeed and can grow this hobby along with everything else. But yeah, just definitely some transparency would go a long way in creating trust and creating benefit. And if the answer is 2025 is really dependent on how this year goes and how membership goes, that goes a lot further than just kind of pretending it's going to be better until we don't have it anymore.
Exactly. I have one last thing, and I think it's really important. We love everyone who reads our articles, listens to our podcast, watches our YouTube channel. As you've heard me say a bunch recently, we are operating in hard times. And while we have been able to keep Brewlosophy afloat, it's taken quite a bit of adjusting on our part. I know we talk about our patrons a lot, and that's because they are 100% responsible for us being here today. But I want to let everyone know that regardless of whether you support us financially or not, that we appreciate you. We hope that what we provide is something that keeps you entertained and motivated to keep doing this awesome hobby. We just passed our 10-year mark. In February of 2024, we hit our 10-year anniversary of doing Brewlosophy. And I'll be honest, it felt really lackluster because of how shitty things are in the industry right now. We didn't feel like we could go out and host a party or do something eventful and fun because the industry just isn't doing very well. I even received more bad news just last week about some people that we really care about in the industry. I'm not going to get into that, but it seems constant now that we're hearing this stuff of breweries shutting down. We had 2 breweries in Fresno announce that they have to close their close up shop here because of this downturn in consumers wanting to drink beer. As always, we will do our best to keep it as real as possible with you guys. And if you have any questions or comments, please do not hesitate to email them to feedback@brewlosophy.com. We want to keep doing this. And in order for that to happen, obviously we have to have other avenues of support. And man, patron people, thank you so much, because you have allowed us to keep doing this. Even those who aren't patrons, if you're doing anything, just listening to this show, you're helping us out as well. So thank you all for that. Now, that is what I've got to say. Please don't forget to listen and subscribe to the Brew Lab podcast as well. Kate Job takes you into the lab with brewing professionals to discuss the fascinating work that they're doing on our favorite beverage. And make sure to head over to brewlosophy.com to stay current on all of the fun beer and brewing stuff we are up to. The Brewlosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brewlosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brewlosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brewlosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey cause it suits my bro. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman no more. Life is good, the likelihood of me.
Fargo, the new virtual assistant from Wells Fargo, makes banking faster and easier. Like this.
Fargo, what's my checking account routing number?
And this.
Fargo, turn off my debit card.
And this.
Fargo, what did I spend on groceries last month?
And that's just the beginning. Do you, Fargo? You can in the Wells Fargo mobile app. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/getfargo.
Terms and conditions apply. Your mobile carrier's availability and message and data rates may apply. Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.